Every morning before sunrise, one man juggled two lives, the father the world saw, and she ran a company of 200 people, yet couldn't find one person who understood her. What began as a favor was about to become something neither of them could take back. His daughter noticed the smile first, long before he ever admitted what it meant.
Ethan Cole never planned on becoming his boss's matchmaker. If you'd told him 3 months ago that he'd spend his evenings coaching Vanessa Steele, CEO of Steele Media Group, through first dates, he would have laughed and gone back to packing his daughter's lunch. But life had a strange way of handing people exactly what they weren't looking for. If this story moves you even a little, do him a favor and hit like before you keep going, and subscribe, because stories like this one only get better from here. Ethan was 34, a single father raising his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, alone since his wife passed away 2 years earlier. He worked as an executive assistant at Steele Media, a job he'd taken because the hours were stable and the pay covered daycare, rent, and not much else. He wasn't ambitious in the way the rest of the office was. He didn't stay late chasing promotions or network at happy hours. Every day at 5:30, he packed his bag, said goodnight to whoever was still around, and drove across town to pick up his daughter from his sister's house. To most of his co-workers, he was polite, quiet, and forgettable. The guy who refilled the coffee machine and remembered everyone's birthday but never seemed to want anything for himself. Vanessa Steele was the opposite in almost every way. She'd built her company from nothing after her father's advertising firm collapsed, turning a failing agency into one of the most respected media companies in the state. She was sharp, disciplined, and utterly exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with work. At 32, she had more professional success than she knew what to do with, and a personal life that existed almost entirely on her phone. In the form of dating apps, she opened out of habit and closed out of disappointment. It started on an ordinary Tuesday. Vanessa called Ethan into her office to help with what she assumed would be a quick administrative task, drafting a professional bio for a dating profile a friend had convinced her to try. She hadn't meant to ask his opinion on more than the wording, but as she read the bio aloud, embarrassed and half-joking about how ridiculous the whole thing felt, Ethan said something she didn't expect. "You're describing what you've accomplished," he said gently, "not who you are when nobody's watching." Vanessa looked up from her screen, caught off guard. "And you'd know the difference. I raise a 7-year-old alone," he said. "I know the difference between what people see and what's actually true pretty well." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she asked him to help her rewrite it. What began as one afternoon turned into a routine neither of them planned. Vanessa would match with someone, feel unsure, and ask Ethan's read on the conversation before agreeing to meet. He had a way of noticing things, a red flag buried in a joke, a kindness that felt performative, a compliment that was really about the other person's ego. He wasn't trying to be clever. He simply paid attention, the same way he paid attention to Lily's moods before she ever said a word about her day. The dates themselves were a parade of near misses. There was a hedge fund manager who spent 40 minutes talking about his car, a charming architect who turned cold the moment Vanessa mentioned she worked more than he did, a kind but painfully dull marketing consultant who fell asleep during dessert. Every Monday morning, Vanessa would recount the details to Ethan over coffee in her office, and every time he'd ask the same quiet question. Did he ask about your life, or just tell you about his? Somewhere in those weeks, something started to shift, though neither of them named it. Vanessa began looking forward to those Monday debriefs more than the dates themselves. She noticed she trusted Ethan's judgment more than her own, not because he told her what to do, but because he listened without an agenda. He never once used the moments to advance himself. He never flirted, never hinted, never made it about him. And that, more than anything, made her curious about who he really was outside the office. She learned about Lily by accident, catching a glimpse of a child's drawing taped inside his laptop bag. When she asked about it, Ethan's entire face changed, softened, opened up in a way she hadn't seen before. He told her about his wife, about the year after she died when he nearly lost himself trying to hold everything together, about the promotion he'd turned down 18 months earlier because it meant travel he couldn't manage alone with a 6-year-old. He said it plainly, without self-pity, the way people talk about things they've made peace with. Vanessa realized sitting across from him that afternoon, that she had never once asked a date the kinds of questions Ethan answered without being asked. She had never felt as unguarded with anyone as she did in that ordinary conversation about a school drawing. Still, she pushed forward with the search because it was easier than sitting with what she was starting to feel. She agreed to a date with a surgeon named Marcus, confident, articulate, seemingly perfect on paper. Ethan reviewed the messages the way he always did, but this time something in his expression was different, quieter. He told her Marcus seemed like a good match, and he meant it. Even though it cost him something to say it, the date went well. Marcus was attentive, funny, genuinely interested in her work. For the first time in months, Vanessa came back to the office energized instead of drained. She told Ethan about it the next morning, watching his reaction carefully, though she couldn't have said exactly why. He smiled, congratulated her, and went back to his desk. But Lily, who'd tagged along to the office that day during a school break, noticed something her father tried to hide. "You don't look happy that she's happy," Lily said, swinging her legs from the chair by his desk. "I am happy for her," Ethan said. "That's not what I asked." Kids have a way of asking the question adults spend years avoiding. Ethan didn't answer her, but he didn't sleep much that night either. Vanessa saw Marcus twice more over the following 2 weeks. He was everything she thought she wanted: successful, kind, easy to be around. And yet, each time she left those dates, she found herself replaying her Monday conversations with Ethan instead, wishing she could tell him how the date went, wanting his reaction more than she wanted the date itself. It was on the third date, listening to Marcus describe a hospital fundraising gala in exhaustive detail, that she realized with sudden, uncomfortable clarity that she was comparing every man she met to someone who wasn't even trying to be compared to. She ended things with Marcus gently the next day, telling him honestly that her attention was elsewhere, even though she hadn't fully admitted that to herself yet. Then she did something she'd never done in 3 months of matchmaking sessions. She stopped opening the dating app altogether. For 2 weeks, she avoided the subject entirely in their Monday meetings, and Ethan, sensing the shift, didn't push. But avoiding it didn't make it disappear, it sharpened it. She found herself noticing the small things: how Ethan remembered exactly how she took her coffee, how he stayed 20 minutes late without complaint when she needed help, how Lily's drawings had slowly filled the inside of his bag over the months, each one a quiet record of a life he was building with enormous care and almost no recognition. The moment that changed everything happened on a Friday evening neither of them had planned for. Vanessa stayed late finishing a proposal, and Ethan stayed to help, the two of them alone in the office, long after everyone else had gone home. When they finally finished, exhausted and laughing about a typo that had slipped into 3 separate drafts, Vanessa suggested they get some air on the rooftop terrace before heading home. Standing at the railing with the city lights spreading out beneath them, Vanessa turned to Ethan and told him the truth she'd been avoiding for weeks. She told him that every man she'd met over the past few months had been measured against a standard she hadn't consciously set: patience, honesty, the ability to really listen, and that the standard had a name. And it wasn't a dating profile she'd swiped past. It was him. Ethan didn't say anything for a long moment. He told her he'd known, in some quiet corner of himself, for longer than he wanted to admit, but that he'd never planned on saying it. Not because he didn't feel it, but because he was her employee, because he had a daughter to think about, because falling for the person you worked for felt like exactly the kind of complication his careful, steady life couldn't afford. "Then let's stop being careful," Vanessa said. It wasn't a dramatic declaration. It was quiet, honest, and true, the same way everything between them had always been. They didn't rush anything after that. Vanessa restructured his role within the company, not as a gesture of favoritism, but because she'd finally seen, clearly, the value he'd brought to every part of the business he'd quietly supported for years. Ethan introduced her to Lily properly a month later, over pancakes on a Saturday morning, and watched with something like relief as his daughter warmed to her almost instantly, later declaring that Vanessa asked good questions, like Dad. Word spread through the office slowly, the way these things always do, but there was no scandal in it, no whispered gossip that stuck. Anyone who'd watched Ethan and Vanessa over the past few months understood exactly how it had happened, not through some grand pursuit, but through the accumulation of 100 small honesties neither of them realized they were building toward. A year later, Vanessa stood at the back of Lily's second-grade art show, holding Ethan's hand, studying a crayon drawing of the 3 of them on the rooftop terrace where everything had changed. Underneath, in a child's careful handwriting, it read, "My dad helped my new mom find the right person. It was him the whole time." Ethan looked at Vanessa, and Vanessa looked back at him, and neither of them needed to say a word. Sometimes the person you're searching for isn't found through a search at all. Sometimes they're the one who's been quietly, patiently there the entire time, packing lunches before sunrise, remembering the coffee order, asking the right questions, waiting not to be chosen, but simply to be seen.